Hello
Hello.
there. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm in DC. My wife and kids are in town. It's very rare. They one of the things when I decided to run for this job, and when you run as a whole family. You really do. Is my wife has a great career, and it was important that we stay in California both for her and for the kids. We love Southern California and Orange County and our region, and so having them here though has been a real treat. My kids are going to a summer camp here, learning about DC, and we don't have any votes this week, so it's a good week.
Yeah, you get a week off. Why? Do you know why you're getting a week off?
I think that the Republicans were trying to jam through the big ugly bill, and as a result, the schedule was completely insane last week, and I think they gave everybody a break from the insanity, at least for a week. Of course, there's plenty of insanity. It's just not coming from the House of Representatives this week.
What is next? What's coming down the pipeline?
So obviously, the Republicans were completely focused on the big ugly bill, on their big reconciliation. Reconciliation is the process that they use to pass it with a simple majority in the House and the Senate, so they don't need any Democratic input or support. But we still have the annual government funding that has to occur. So I think we're now something like however many days away September 30th is. If you recall, back in March, Chuck Schumer gave in on the what they call a CR. I know it's a lot of inside baseball, but the continuing resolution to fund the government. And basically, Democrats in the Senate helped with that and got that continuing resolution through until September 30. September 30 will be here before you know it, because there aren't that many legislative weeks between now and then where both the House and Senate are in at the same time. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and the way this should work and used to work under normal circumstances when we actually had a co-equal branch of government is the House and Senate Appropriations Committees would come together, would vote on 12 spending bills representing each part of the federal spending, and then they would iron out the differences between the House and the Senate, and then that ultimately would become the law, and that's how we would spend the money. That would be our budget. And that, by the way, that's required by the Constitution. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the Constitution says it's the Congress that has the power of the purse and figures out how to, appropriate the funds. But what's happened is basically my Republican colleagues have given up. They've given up their power. They've given up as being a co-equal branch, or really, adhering to their constitutional responsibilities. And I don't know if they've forgotten that the oath they took was not to Donald Trump, that they represent 750,000 or so people in their communities, but they basically given up and rolled over. So the next 2 months, 3 months, it's going to be a mess, and we'll even see if Republicans can get a continuing resolution done on their own. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. But we're in a very unusual situation. And of course, if the Republicans can't get it across the line to fund the government, and they lean on Schumer again, and Schumer has a backbone and says no, then we're looking at a government shutdown. And a government shutdown is not a good thing. People get hurt in a government shutdown. However, you're given two bad alternatives here.
Right.
Do you let the Republicans roll us over again, or do you fight? And I felt back in March that we should have fought, and I feel now we should fight to be a participant with a seat at the table. We were all elected to serve and to represent the interests of our constituents, not just to roll over and play dead. I hope that's what happens.
I'm hearing in the Senate there's something called a rescission package.
Yes, okay. The House passed it on a party line
Right.
vote. What the rescissions package is basically the way it's supposed to work is, as I said, the Congress is supposed to develop the spending plan. And then working with the White House, usually the White House will say, well, we don't want to spend money on X, Y, and Z. And then that will go back to the Congress, and the Congress can then vote up or down on whether or not to advance those cuts or rescissions. And in this case, it's roughly $9 billion that the administration is focused on, but it's things like PBS, NPR. There's a lot of stuff in there that I certainly support, but we'll see. And it did pass the House on a party line vote, and it very well may pass the Senate. They're going to need some Democratic support, and I'm not sure they'll have it.
It's amazing how much awful things they're trying to do.
I was just on a walk with my wife this morning. We were out on the National Mall, and in front of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is right there on the National Mall, which is this beautiful building done in the kind of the Romanesque style with the big pillars. They have these banners, these massive banners in front, and one of them is of Abraham Lincoln, and one of them is of Donald Trump. And I looked at that and I thought, my God, what country is this? That could you imagine what they would have done if they would have put a banner of Barack Obama or Joe Biden in front of one of our agencies in that manner? The Republican Party, very sadly, is no longer a functioning political party. It really has become a cult of one person. And as long as that's the case, it's going to be very difficult for us to do things in good faith on a bipartisan way. It's so sad seeing the way that these appropriations meetings have gone, because it used to be that the Appropriations Committee was the most bipartisan committee. The old saying is you have Republicans, Democrats, and appropriators. So appropriators come together and fund the government. I'll give you one example from our most recent meeting. In 2022, a plaque was commissioned to commemorate the January 6th officers, Capitol Police, and the other law enforcement that protected us on that day, protected members of Congress and our staff on that day. And, I owe them personally a tremendous debt of gratitude, as does every member of Congress, as does every staffer in the Capitol, not just that day, but every day. They really do protect us, and they do an incredible job. And so a plaque was commissioned and was actually made, was cast in bronze with the Capitol in January 6, 2021, and then listing all the different law enforcement agencies that protected the Capitol that day. In addition, it was to be installed. It was a deal that was worked out between Kevin McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi, and Mitch McConnell at the time, and Chuck Schumer. In addition to that plaque, there was to be a digital kiosk with each individual officer that protected the Capitol that day. And Mike Johnson became Speaker, and the plaque was never installed because obviously they're afraid. They're afraid of pissing off Donald Trump. They tell the truth about what happened that contradicts the MAGA narrative. We offered an amendment to install the plaque and had posters made of the plaque. And I put one in front of my office. Many of my colleagues put them in front of theirs. Shouldn't be partisan or political, but they won't install it. They won't do it. I mean, it's such a small token, but for me, it's so symbolic of what we're seeing. There's a lot we could talk about, but that's just one that really stuck out to me as being truly reprehensible.
Yeah, I've loved seeing everyone talking about putting those in front of their office. I think they're incredibly powerful that they're doing that. I mean, that's one really big way in which Democrats are fighting back, in terms of you see this plaque and it's not being allowed to be put up. And I really loved what you said in the committee hearing. I think I was in my Daily Dems actually, about the plaque and the importance of it and what Republicans are doing. In terms of going back a little bit to the bill, how do you think we had an impact? Because I think a lot of people feel like they didn't oh well, it passed anyway, what did we do? So did you see anything that as citizens, as allies, as voters, we did that made a difference?
Yeah, big time. So the bill's terrible, but it would have been even worse. And I'll give you the example of Medicaid. So what they wound up doing, what the Republicans wound up doing, is going after the so-called work requirements. And that's the basis by which they're making these very severe cuts in who's going to get Medicaid. Originally, they wanted to make far deeper cuts. They wanted to go after two things called FMAP and the per capita caps. Those two things would have led to maybe tens of millions of people losing their care, as opposed to only, I say only, 8 or 10 million losing their Medicaid. Um, so it could have been an order of magnitude worse, is my point. And just the same on nutrition, they wound up shifting a quarter of the costs away from the federal government and imposing more restrictive requirements. That could have been worse too, because the cruelty of some of my colleagues in the Freedom Caucus and really their disregard for those most vulnerable in our society is astonishing. Um, you know, Everybody's advocacy matters. And it matters now as well, because there's going to be a real battle over the narrative of what this bill is all about. We already see the administration improperly sending Social Security recipients false information. You see, they're going to use every tool or trick in the book, old media and new media, official and unofficial resources, to try to manipulate people's beliefs about what's in this bill and what's not in this bill. And the reality is that if we fight and if we use every tool that we have, flood the zone on our side, I think the truth will come out, and the truth is ugly.
Yeah.
Basically, what they have done, what the Republicans have done, is they have front loaded all of the sugar high of this bill. The things that seem like they're good. And look, there are a couple of things as a Californian, for example, I think increasing the SALT cap, state and local tax deduction cap, from 10,000 to 40,000, that'll help a lot of middle class people in my district. In my district, if you own a house, regardless of your income, you're going to get hit on the state and local tax deduction just by virtue of your property taxes, for example. So it's a good thing that they did that, but that's temporary, 5 years. Just the same, they raised the standard deduction. They raised the child tax credit a little bit. They have this new senior tax credit, which is different from no tax on Social Security, but that's what they're trying to say. So, okay, I get that. They have the new $1,000 if you have a child in the next few years. I hate the name Trump account, but I understand why they did it. So all those things, you can no tax on tips, even though it's not being implemented in a very equitable way. No tax on overtime, even though that's not being implemented in an equitable way. But if you were to take all those provisions that I just mentioned, if that were the bill, I would say, okay, well, that's not the worst thing I've ever seen. That would be just a missed opportunity, but not this awful, awful situation. So all those things I just mentioned to you, it's important to know two things. Number one is they're temporary. Number two is they take effect immediately. So all the things I just mentioned are going to take effect immediately. And the administration is going to say, see, the Democrats are lying about this bill being so bad. Nobody lost their health care, et cetera. Nobody lost their food. It didn't cause costs to go up, all the things that we're alleging. But the reality of it is that there is a delay of the worst provisions, the Medicaid provisions, the Medicare provisions, the Affordable Care Act provisions, hospitals and nursing homes potentially shutting down, SNAP benefits, energy costs going up, and ultimately trillions and trillions of dollars in extra debt that we're going to have to pay off, that kids, grandkids, and future generations are going to have to pay off. All that stuff's going to happen, but all that stuff gets delayed. However, the tax cuts for the very wealthiest and the biggest corporations, those are permanent. And those are the reason that we're blowing a hole in the debt. That's the reason. There's no great national purpose for this bill other than to give tax cuts to rich people. So I think it's a messaging battle. Now, the last thing I'll say about this is at the end of this year, we will see premiums go up for Affordable Care Act policies. So in California, we have Covered California. The estimates are that the premiums are going to go up dramatically. And also, you're going to see private insurance premiums. So if you have employer covered insurance, you're going to see those premiums go up dramatically as well, because the insurers are saying, wow, the federal government is going to have much less skin in the game. Somebody's got to pick up the costs, because when somebody goes to the emergency room, by law, they have to be covered. Now, I worry that law is going to change. The Republicans' next step is to say, okay, that's too burdensome. We'll just make it so people don't have to be cared for if they get sick. I wouldn't be surprised to have some advocate for that.
Yeah.
So, point being, is the bad stuff is going to take time. The hospital closures, another example. The way that is going to occur is over a number of years, the amount that the hospitals can collect in what are known as provider taxes will go down gradually over time. But we already saw Trump care. They say Obamacare, we can say Trump care. We just saw the first hospital casualty from Trump care. A rural hospital in Nebraska has decided to close its doors. And every time that you see a hospital close, I think you should ask, why did this hospital close? Anyway, it's a long way of saying is that this bill is very complex, and the messaging battle will be very important.
What do you think we can do to combat that messaging battle? Because we have the risk of sounding like we're crying wolf. How do we not do that?
Well, part of it is we have to hope that the legacy media will appropriately cover and explain with some level of detail what actual impact the legislation has. I do think that we should push for, look, if the Republicans are going to defund PBS and NPR, it doesn't mean that those news organizations are going to shut down. It just means that private philanthropy everyday people who love NPR and PBS are going to need to pick up the slack. And I give to our local PBS at NPR station a very small amount of money. And of course, there's a firewall between editorial and their development. But nonetheless, we need for organizations like that to cover the nuance, and then we need to amplify that in new and alternative media. I would also say we need experts to be out there on podcasts, on live opportunities like this. More is better. More is better. Telling the story is important as well. Sharing the story of the senior or the veteran or the family that can no longer get health care or food, even though they qualify. They meet the statutory criteria for the program, but they haven't met the bureaucratic requirement. And we know from a Kaiser Family Foundation study that 92% of the people who are going to lose their care under the Medicaid provisions are people who would otherwise qualify for the care. They meet the work requirements. They just didn't fill out paperwork.
Right. It has nothing to do with work requirements. It has to do with paperwork requirements.
Paper. Oh, I like that. I might have to remember that.
Take it.
Paperwork. I like that.
Yeah. So are you planning on going on Fox News and MSNBC and doing more of the rounds to amplify this?
I think we all need to. I think it's important. Now, you know this, the cable news rarely wants you on to talk about what you want to talk about. So it's always news of the day, whatever Marjorie Taylor Greene just tweeted or posted or whatever Trump just put on Truth Social. So we have to be opportunistic and proactive in getting out the message about what this legislation has actually done. And we have to be willing as Democrats to talk about the debt and the deficit, because we are now the fiscally responsible party. We've always been accused of being, somehow like these profligate spenders. And, I just remember that the Affordable Care Act was paid for. The American Rescue Plan was in response to a massive once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And again, this time, they're just blowing a massive hole in the debt. This is on them. And they did it before under Trump 1.0. They did it under W. Bush. They did it under Reagan. And, it didn't work the first, second, or third time. The trickle-down economics won't work the fourth time either.
What do you think is going to be the first bad part of the bill that's going to be implemented, and how can people see it and amplify it?
I would say the first big noticeable thing, the bad thing that will happen is your health insurance premiums will go up at the end of the year. When the open enrollment period comes up, that's when you'll see a big boost or big jump in your premiums. If you're on the Affordable Care Act and you're on an exchange in your state, then you're going to see potentially a dramatic increase. If you're on private insurance, you're going to see probably a quite significant increase. So that will be like the first tell that something is amiss. Um, you know, and there will be plenty more things in 27, 26, 27, 28. A lot of the Medicaid provisions, the states have until either the end of 26 or beginning of 27 to implement and to roll out, which is, I mean, really sneaky if you think of it, because they're waiting until the
After the
next election to
midterms.
pass. But we just have to message proactively and aggressively about what's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? And the private insurers, they're smart. They want to make sure they capture every bit of profit they can, and they're not going to absorb, you know, the difference. They're going to pass that along to the insured.
Yeah. I know that there's part of the bill that has to do with student loans,
Oh yeah,
and that it's going to go up by like $400 a month
yeah,
or something. When
yeah,
does that
yeah.
go into effect?
Some of those provisions go into effect quickly. And so that's absolutely right. It will make college more expensive, and there will be fewer programs that you will qualify for. They also want to do everything they can to kneecap the public service loan forgiveness program. I actually think that what we should have done, and I said this during President Biden's term, and I tried, but what I thought would have passed constitutional muster. First of all, I think the president would have been wise to engage with the Congress and get something across the line in the House and Senate, because it would have withstood any sort of court scrutiny over what the executive could do to forgive student loans. But Congress sets the federal student loan interest rate. So I would just set that rate at 0%. So I would have interest-free federally backed student loans. And then the other thing I would recommend is increasing the Pell Grant substantially. When the Pell Grant originally came around, it was supposed to cover 80% of the cost of a college education. And now it covers 20, 30%, 40% at most. There's just a desire on the Republican side to eviscerate public education. For that matter, K through 12 just as bad as higher education. And it's sort of they're on a path to privatization across the board, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare for veterans. They fought vehemently when the Affordable Care Act was being debated against a public option, for example. And I see now this push to privatization for veterans care, which has been a little bit under the radar, but has nonetheless been really troubling also.
Is that just their push, or is there something that's going into effect? And if so, when?
So far, that is just their push. So I would anticipate, though, that they are going to do this. So I mentioned at the beginning that under normal circumstances, the appropriations committees in the House and Senate would work on crafting 12 spending bills. One of those is in part for the VA. The president submits a budget request, and then the Congress works out a budget bill. Um, the president's budget request, it lacked detail. Let's just say it lacked detail. It was very high level, very unusual how little detail it had. But this was Russ Vought, who's the head of the Office of Management and Budget, who really was behind this. And of course, he was the architect of Project 2025, or at least one of the architects of Project 2025. They want to move 75%, three quarters of all new veterans healthcare spending to private care. There's no way to do that without really undermining the long-term stability of VA healthcare. And it's also a matter of specialization and veteran and the understanding of how to serve veterans, right? Which the VA has done an incredibly good job. It's not perfect, but it's better for the veterans in my community. They tell me to go to the VA whenever they can. Community care, as it's known, private care, was developed under President Obama in 2014 to supplement public VA care. not to replace it. And now basically the administration wants to replace VA healthcare with private doctors, private specialists, private clinics, and at the same time they want to fire a bunch of the VA employees. So it is happening. It's very sad to say this, but I expect that in the coming months they're going to take those ideas from just being something they're pushing to being something they're going to execute on.
Right.
Unless veterans fight back. I think the only way it stops is if veterans fight back. And that means Republican, MAGA supporting, Trump supporting veterans who happen to like the VA. They need to speak up if they want the VA to stay in its current capacity. Otherwise, they're going to strip it, sell it off for parts, and give the money to their insurance company donors.
Can you explain what private means in these circumstances? Because I think people
Yeah.
hear constantly private versus public, but I don't think everyone knows what that
Well, in the
actually
context
means.
of VA healthcare, do you go to a facility that is owned or operated by the Veterans Administration that is the federal government in charge, or do you instead go to a private hospital or non-for-profit hospital, just as you would as a civilian? Obviously, in the context of education, it would be giving a voucher to a parent rather than sending their child to a public school. You could use that voucher for a private school. So that's just sort of what they want to do across the board.
How does that impact how care works in terms, or how schooling works, or what are you losing with private?
Well, I went to both public and private schools. Mostly it was public for me until high school, and then I went to a Jesuit high school and then to private colleges. My wife went to public schools straight through, all the way from kindergarten all the way through to her business school. She went private business school, but other than that, and I think great public schools and great teachers in our public school system are fundamental to just a good education for everyone. There's no better dollar that we spend than on children having a better future, whether it's better educational outcomes or enough to eat, or being able to go to a doctor. I mean, that's basic stuff, and we know that the long term is incredibly positive when you invest in children. And for veterans, I think it's a matter of the knowledge and the specialization that the VA has when it comes to veterans' mental health, post-traumatic stress. Being able to understand the circumstances of our veteran community, is not something that every civilian hospital has the capability to do. All you need to do is ask a veteran. They know better than I do.
And one final question before I let you go, the same things I asked last time. What's giving you hope right now?
But right now, what's giving me hope is in my campaign and in campaigns all across the country, there are young people who are engaged in a way that for me is really reminiscent of 2018, when we had a big blue wave that led to Democrats taking control of the House. And I feel it. I feel it on the ground. We have the Democracy Summer program, which is an amazing program that my friend Jamie Raskin started. And we've got like 30 or 40 Democracy Summer fellows right now. And a couple of them might be watching right now for all I know. But they give me tremendous hope. I spoke with that group yesterday, and just seeing their commitment to want to do something a little bit bigger than self, give back to this country, learn about our democracy and our institutions, understand how America became great in the first place by giving opportunities to people from all walks of life to work hard and to have a better future. And then wanting to contribute to that gives me great hope. So I firmly believe that we're going to find the next few years to be very difficult, but I do believe we're going to take back the House in 2026. Project 2026 started when Donald Trump signed the big ugly bill. And as far as I'm concerned, we're going to take back the House. We're going to take back the Senate. 2028, we're going to take back the White House, and we're going to begin to recover from this very difficult and dark period. Doesn't feel like the golden age to me.
No.
Feels like a lot of institutions are being broken, but America's been through an awful lot. We're a resilient nation, and we're going to come back, and we're going to be better and stronger than we were as a result of all of this. So it's going to be rough. I guess that's um, realistic optimism. How about that? It's not going to be better next week or next month. This time next year, we'll be really getting in the swing of the 2026 election. So I'm eager for that.
Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to doing this again. And have an
Of course.
amazing week and summer in
Thank,
DC.
thank you.
And yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
I always
so
enjoy
much.
it. Always enjoy it. Thank you so much. Take
Too.
care.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
bye.